After more than a dozen closed-door interviews, 8 public hearings, and more than 70 days of investigation, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is ready to pull the trigger on impeachment.
The president leaves us no choice but to act because he is trying to corrupt, once again, the election for his own benefit. Today, I am asking our chairman to proceed with articles of impeachment.
So it seemed like a straightforward announcement until this exchange.
Do you hate the president, Madam Speaker?
I think the president is a coward when it comes to helping our kids who are afraid of gun violence. I think he is cruel when he doesn't deal with helping our dreamers, of which we're very proud. I think he's in denial about the climate crisis. However, that's about the election. This is about the election. Take it up in the election. This is about the Constitution of the United States and the facts that lead to the president's violation of his oath of office. And as a Catholic, I resent your using the word hate in a sentence that addresses me. I don't hate anyone. I was raised in a way that is a heart full of love, and always prayed for the president. So don't mess with me when it comes to words like that.
Glad I didn't ask that question. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that in Pelosi's town hall event tonight. But as she also mentioned, there is an election going on too, one with a lot of Democrats running. But lately a pattern is starting to emerge. And after starting out as the most diverse group of candidates in history, just 5 of the 15 remaining are people of color after Kamala Harris dropped out this week. And as of today, not a single one of them will appear in the next debate late in December. Joining me to discuss our Boston City Councilor, Lydia Edwards. Councilor, it's good to see you. Kaivan Shroff is the founder of the group Millennial Democrats and a former digital organizer for Hillary Clinton, who I'm sure watched Howard Stern last night. Nice to see you as well. So Kamala Harris dropped out a day or two ago. Over the weekend, there was a brutal piece in the New York Times saying her campaign was in total chaos, horribly organized, no message. And then Charles Blow comes along, also in the New York Times, and says, if that's where your analysis begins and ends, you're missing 2 of the most relevant factors in her fall from grace, her gender and her race. Is he right?
That her gender and her race were part of her fall from grace?
Yes.
No.
No?
No. Her gender and her race were not a part of that. I think that there's many messages that we can look and learn from this. One, her staffer coming out with a scathing letter and demonstrating that there's such internal conflict. That impacts your donors and whether they believe in you and whether you can generate the resources to deliver your message. I think that hurt her more than anything in the world. I think the fact that she is a woman of color and on the stage gave her a voice for many people. I don't think that it was a negative to be either of those things, nor do I think that it hurt her campaign.
Do you think it was a negative?
I do think that she faced an unfair media landscape to begin with. I think the number of times that her campaign was declared dead again and again went on for months. It's not just that article that you mentioned from the weekend. And I think if you look at somebody like Bernie Sanders, whose campaign has certainly not performed at the level people expected, who has had 3-4 top advisors leave, who had factions, who wasn't paying workers what they wanted, who had all these problems, not one article says something like, oh, the unraveling of Bernie Sanders' campaign or something like that. And so I think looking at both of those things together, it does seem like there's bias.
Can we stay on the media criticism for a second? Julian Castro, who will likely not be on the stage in the end of December, is also a person of color, said exactly those same things, that the media looks at this issue of electability, which is what we're obsessed with, but the Democratic voters appear to be too, and we treat it differently with white candidates and candidates of color. Do you agree with him?
I would say that there are certain candidates whose qualifications have been downplayed. While candidates, Pete Buttigieg, for example, is a mayor of a small town. Julian Castro was the mayor of Houston. Cory Booker, I believe, was of Newark.
Mayor of Newark.
Cory Booker is a Rhodes Scholar, so is Pete Buttigieg. But the only person, he's Mayor Pete, and he's the Rhodes Scholar. And I think that there's a disadvantage or some sort of concentration on those particular qualities, as though they matter only when it comes to Mayor Pete, but they're completely ignored when it comes to Julian Castro or Cory Booker.
Can we step back a little bit from the Harris thing? How big a problem is it that on December 19th, if nothing changes, that there will be all-white candidates? Bakari Sellers, former state senator from South Carolina, had a great quote where he said there'll be more billionaires on the stage than there will be African Americans. They could have said and other people of color. He went on to say in 2016, it was off by a year, look at the Republican stage, and you had Carson, Cruz, and Rubio. So Is it a problem for the Democratic Party, whose most reliable base are people of color, particularly African Americans?
Well, I think it's a problem to the extent that we're saying we're running to build a coalition that represents America, and if the candidates that we have put forth that can build support don't reflect that, I think it speaks to that. And I think, by the way, that really gets into a lot of the conversation about Buttigieg and what his role plays in this primary process, because I think for people, at least for me personally, and I think a lot of my peers, we are disappointed to see somebody that can't excite, the Democratic base, which is a very diverse and, predominantly people of color. I think probably a quarter of the primary voters will be of color, if not more. And so to be able to activate them is critical.
While a lot of criticism, I think legitimately, has been heaped on people who do what I do for a living, as I mentioned a minute ago, the Democratic National Committee. Having said that, the problem is the voters, if there's a problem. I mean, let me put up a poll from the summer. These are Democratic primary voters. It was in the USC LA Times poll asking about who can beat Trump. 68% said a white person, 70% said a man. And all you have to do, by the way, and it's not just white voters who believe that. Let's go to South Carolina. 44% of the Democratic black vote is going to Joe Biden. Combined between Harris, Deval Patrick, and Cory Booker is only 9%. So it seems all Democratic voters say, rightly or wrongly, a white guy is who we need to win this race.
I'm going to break that down a little bit.
Please.
I think the poll in and of itself, I think there's skews and issues with who actually gets asked that question. And so unless you can back up what that poll of how many women, how many people of color, what their age group was, I think that you're just relying on that one poll of 68% and 70% might be a little, I think, naive and skewing the numbers.
Four top candidates, by the way, are white. Three of them are men. The proof is in the...
But there's also and there's been no denying from day one, Biden has had a majority of the African American vote in all the polls, right? He is leading amongst all of the candidates, but look why? For many people, it's because of his loyalty to Obama. It was his proximity in working for and with Obama as well. So having and working with other African Americans and demonstrating that. So when you look at the stage,
that doesn't make it less significant, does it? I mean,
no. What it does mean is that when you look at a stage that's all white, I guess, in this December debate coming up.
As of the moment, it may change.
The question for a lot of folks is who amongst you are going to be able to demonstrate that coalition building, who amongst you can demonstrate that you can work with, help, lead, promote, and empower.
So you think it's okay if those white candidates there show that they're serious about reaching out to communities of color?
The fact is, this is the exception to the rule that we even had this many candidates of color.
The
majority of the debates have always been all white. So this is not new for African Americans or people of color to not have this option.
Are you where she is?
Well, I think, I agree with that, absolutely. But I do think, to your point about the role that the media plays and also what voters say, I mean, there's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy going on there where voters are relying on the media to tell them the stories that they need.
That's exactly what the criticism is. We create.
And then, of course, there's a feedback loop there where the media is also probably putting out what they think voters, to an extent, think and want to hear. But I do think that the number of times likability or electability or any of those issues were brought up, it was about Elizabeth Warren, it was about Kamala Harris, it was about Cory Booker, it was about Obama. But I'm just saying, the same questions aren't asked of people like Buttigieg, who, by the way, is also of a minority status to an extent, and I think we can debate, I think he would like to have that debate about sort of the suppression Olympics, but I think at the end of the day, it really is about, who is asked to defend themselves from the start. And I think a lot of these interviews start that way.
Since you mentioned Pete Buttigieg only 4 times between you, he was on our radio show today. And I asked him about this issue of being on a stage on December 19th with only 5 other whites. Here's what he had to say.
As a candidate, I don't think it's my place to say the rules that we should be competing under. From January, when our biggest goal was to just get on a debate stage at all, and by the way, be the first LGBTQ candidate to manage to do that, to today when we find ourselves in the top tier, we take the rules as they're given and do everything we can to compete within them.
Very quickly, we'll have a few seconds. Cory Booker disagrees, says the DNC is at fault. If I assume Buttigieg's next sentence would have been, we all knew the rules, they were administered equally, them's the breaks.
Yeah, I am sympathetic to that view. I don't like the cop-out that I think Warren and he both have given, which is, if you don't like the rules, say it. You're running for leader of the free world. I mean, you owe people your thoughts on all of these issues. You can be balanced in how you portray them, but I think that was a cop-out.
15 seconds.
I think, honestly, he has a trust deficit, and him being able to say that the rules that is benefiting him in this moment, he would be the president to say, when I see those structural isms and systemic biases benefiting me, I'm going to call them out. He had an opportunity to call it out, and he didn't.
Nice to see you both. Thanks
Great
so
to
much.
see you.
Councilor, appreciate your time, as always. Thanks so much.